Hi guys, so we've been doing these live stream videos for a couple weeks now. Last week we did our anniversary one, which was really fun, kind of silly, but it was fun. Just kind of reflecting everything. So the week before that, we were on the topic of domestic violence cases, and we're splitting it into a couple parts. We're actually going to keep this going for the next video as well. So I'm gonna give you guys just like a minute to kind of tune in. Well see if anyone else pops on here, and then
we have Elise on.
Hi.
Hey, Elise.
Then yeah, we'll get into it. But yeah, we do work with like a lot of DV cases, and that's a lot of our.
I would say a third or half.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
And like we said last week, that there's a lot of military members here too, and that one of the things that happens in DV cases is that you can't have any weapons in it, anything like that. So I feel like that was a big thing that I thought stood out, just like in this area, a lot of people, that's part of their jobs. So that's why we like to get the info out, because it pertains to, a lot of our cases and stuff. So
it's just good information to have too. For people who are, especially in Colorado Springs where we have so many military bases, it's good so that if you hopefully never have to be in a situation like that, but if you know someone, then you're able to say, hey, well, I know this from this video, and let me help you out and get you in touch with someone.
Definitely. So I think we're going to get into it. You guys always come back and watch this if you need, if you're not tuning in right now. We love to see it. So 2 weeks ago, like I said, we went over the first part of our DV case series. So we talked a little bit about the mandatory arrest, kind of what's involved with that. Do you want to give us a little?
I mean, the idea is in Colorado we have what's called a mandatory arrest law. It doesn't necessarily mean someone needs to get arrested, but the police believe that it means someone is arrested anytime there's a call on an act of domestic violence. So normally what we see in domestic violence cases is we see the police are called, a lot of the times they're called because they just don't want this other person in their house. But then the police say, well, we have to make an arrest, so we're going to arrest you. And then we have to go through this process. And once the police are involved and once the DA has charges, it is out of your hands. And it's really unfortunate because a lot of people, especially what we see is people who call on their spouses who are either suicidal or having just issues that are alcohol related but not domestic violence related, and their spouse or partner calls to say, okay, well, we don't know what else to do, I need them out of the house because they're unsafe, and then that person gets arrested. So it's tough, but a mandatory arrest law means that someone is going to jail and you're going to spend somewhere between 1 to 3 days in the county jail. And it is an incredibly traumatic experience to have to go through.
So there's going to be the mandatory arrest, you're going to jail, and then there's protection order, mandatory, included in that. How long does that normally?
So in Colorado, there's a mandatory protection order that's issued in any domestic violence case. The protection order will normally say you can't go back to the home where the named victim is, which if people are married, that's usually your home if you're the person being accused. So you can't go home, you can't talk to your spouse. Sometimes they will say that you can't even talk to your kids, because sometimes they'll list your kids on the protection order, saying that they were in the home when this happened, so they're part of the protection order. So when this happens, it can be an incredibly stressful time, because not only are you going through jail, which is an awful experience, but then you can't go home, you can't get your things, and until you can get an attorney to help you modify that protection order, or unless your spouse comes to court and says, hey, I want this protection order lifted, I want to be able to talk to my spouse, you're kind of, you're stuck. It's rough.
So when we talked about that last week, I asked the question well, then how do you get to your things and stuff? So we did go over a keep the peace order, and that's the sheriff escorts you to go and get your belongings. You said it's only a couple minutes. Okay.
So it's a quick run in, grab your stuff and leave. And if you have an attorney, they can file a motion to request to keep the peace order. If you don't have an attorney, you can ask the court to give you one. Sometimes they'll give you one, sometimes they won't. It depends on the facts of the case. But generally speaking, you can at least get that one time to get in with the police, get the things you need, like clothes or shoes, because sometimes people are arrested without those too. And then you have to get out until the protection order is modified.
Okay, good info. And then the last thing we talked about last week was just kind of like what kinds of things can work in our favor. And we said we have a lot of good references you know, people that we're close to professionally that you get in therapies, you get in treatments, you work on your character, all that kind of stuff can work in your favor. We can use that. So we just like to mention that there are things that we can do to work with you to get you the best outcome.
Right. It's not just about criminal defense. So we try to do things in the right way. That's why we're Right Law Group. So what we're trying to do is help our clients get back on track, not only with their criminal case, but get back on track with their life. So a lot of the times that means going to a mental health counselor or a therapist. A lot of our clients actually go to like a pastor or some religious figure to seek counseling in that way too. Yeah. Anything that you want to do or that you're able to do to help you feel more stable, our job as a law firm is to take care of the criminal case. Your job is to take care of you and make sure you're safe, getting back on track mentally and help. I mean, even if you're completely innocent in your charge, it's going to do a number on your psyche. So you need to do everything you can to protect yourself.
Awesome. Yep. So that's kind of what we went over last week. This week it's going to be a little bit shorter, but we do have a couple things to touch on. So
we actually had some questions come in about these, so we wanted to address those.
So one of them is just like a general timeline. I know every case is different, but what happens, like, you know, you're arrested, you go to jail, after 1 to 3 days you're out. What happens from then? How does this, we enter the case, then how does this go?
So that's a really good question, especially now with COVID.
Yeah.
It's a mess. Domestic violence cases are very much kind of a hurry up and wait situation. So the first part of a domestic violence case happens very, very quickly. You have a lot going on at once. So you have the arrest, where the police are called, you're taken to jail immediately, you're processed, you're sitting there. Then you're going to have your first court date within 1 to 5 days of the arrest, depending on how busy the court schedule is. So what you'll have is it's a hearing on advisement or a hearing on bond, where the judge will set a bond. They'll ask for input from the alleged victim in the case. So if it's a husband and a wife and the husband is arrested, the DA's office has to reach out to the wife and say, hey, what are you wanting to see in this case? What do we need to know? They also ask questions like, are there guns in the home? Are you fearful for your safety? Do you need a protection order to stay in place? Do you want to have contact? So that first hearing happens very quickly. And then after that first hearing, the next hearing is usually set out by about 2 weeks to 6 weeks, depending on how busy the court calendars are. And that's going to be your first appearance in front of a judge, your actual judge. So people get confused. The judges here, at least in El Paso County, rotate. So for the advisement, when you're arrested and you're appearing from jail, which is a difficult thing to do, but you're appearing in jail for that bond hearing, you see a judge on the screen. That may or may not be the judge that you have. It's just the judge covering the advisements that day. But then your next court date, which is usually a pretrial conference, is in front of an actual judge. Now, there are some other things that you can do where you can have a hearing set to modify a protection order. So if the judge doesn't modify the protection order at your bond hearing to allow contact between you and your spouse, if it's later requested, we can set a bond modification hearing. If someone isn't able to get out on a bond, if it's a more serious crime like a strangulation or an assault, and they have a high bond set, we can request another bond hearing so that we can argue bond again, see if we can get a better traction in front of that judge. But then normally after that first stint, so the first couple of weeks, it's very, very fast. Things are moving very quickly. And then it's kind of a waiting period. So for us at Right Law Group, what we do is we get onto the case, we file our entries of appearance, we request all of the discovery, and discovery is just like the police reports that the state has against you, body-worn camera evidence, statements of witnesses, statements of victims, pictures, all of that. We collect it all. We make sure that we are reviewing it thoroughly, and then we make sure our clients have access to that so that they can go through the discovery with us. We then have a strategy session with our clients so that they fully understand the charges, they fully understand the evidence that's going to be used against them, they fully understand what is happening in the case, and we devise our plan of action moving forward. So between the bond hearing and the pretrial conference, the client may not see a lot happening, but we at the law firm are super, super busy going through everything, making sure we've prepared everything. And then it kind of tapers off. It can be very, very stressful because I think one of the most difficult things, other than being arrested, one of the most trying things that someone has to go through in a domestic violence case is the waiting period, trying to figure out what's going to happen. There are just a ton of different ways that cases can go. You can have multiple pretrial conferences set. You can have a pretrial conference and an arraignment. An arraignment is just a date where you have to enter a plea of some kind. So either a plea of guilty or a plea of not guilty, which then starts trial. So these cases can last anywhere. Generally what we see is the very, very quickest a domestic violence case goes, and it's very rare, is 2 months maybe.
Yeah.
But usually we're seeing cases last anywhere from 6 months to a year with all the court processes that we have to go through. Sometimes we're able to get our clients in as part of a plea negotiation to an evaluator. We talk to the ladies over at Partners in Change or Tessa, get them in with them, talking to them, seeing if we can find some other way to resolve this case other than them ending up with charges or criminal convictions, not charges, but criminal convictions. So there's no real set time frame, and that's what's often really frustrating. People will say, well, I've already been to court 3 times. What's going on? Unfortunately, especially now with COVID pushing everything back, we have a lot of delays in the court system. And the biggest thing, and I think the most important thing that your lawyer can do, which we at Right Law Group really strive to do, is just stay in constant communication, making sure you know what's going on. That's one thing that our firm really does well. I think we have text messaging, emailing, phone calls. You can contact us on Facebook. But that's really when you're either going through that yourself, or if you have a family member that's going through this, it's really important to know that you just have to be there for them, because it's going to take a while to resolve. And even if the other person who called the cops says, I don't want this case to move forward, unfortunately it's out of their hands and it has to go through the system with the way that the Colorado domestic violence laws.
Once it starts, it's in there. We're
Yep.
going.
Once it's reported, there is no stopping it. It has to go through the whole process.
Yep. So it's like, it's a waiting game. But that's why we're here. We're here to support you. That's why we have a lot, going on. But we keep our clients, we make sure that they know what's going on. We're on the same page. Those strategy sessions are so important. So, we're all confident with how we're going to try and fight the case. So another thing that we see in DV cases is the topic of child custody. So when you share children with, the victim, how does that, how do you see them? How do you,
that gets really complicated. It depends first and foremost on what you're being charged with. So if you're charged with hurting your spouse in some way, or hurting the named victim in the case, or shoving them anything, and it's only relating to them, children should not come into play. Now, realistically, that becomes a problem because, let's say, typically we see a male being charged and a female with the kids at home.
Yeah.
So if we say, okay, well, dad has a protection order against mom, but not against his kids, how does he actually see his kids? Because he can't go home unless the protection order is modified. So in a situation like that, there are a couple of things we can do. Number one, we can ask for the protection order to be modified to allow contact, even if it's a really severe case. So even if the named victim in the case doesn't want the person to have contact with them, we can still get in there and request the judge to modify the protection order to allow contact solely for the purpose of communicating regarding children exchanges. A lot of people, especially in contentious cases, a lot of people do exchanges either at a neutral location like a grandmother's house, or at the police station where there are video cameras so that everyone feels safe and everything's recorded. So that's one way. The other way is there's this app called Talking Parents app. A lot of people like to utilize that instead because the communication there is recorded and it can be sent to the judge so that everyone is safe and protected. There's no deleting text message or anything. It's all laid out there. But it gets more sticky if there is an allegation of child abuse in addition to domestic violence. And unfortunately, what we see a lot of the times, and people get very, very confused about this because they'll say, well, I didn't touch my kids. I didn't abuse my kids. I may have shoved my spouse, but I didn't hurt my kids. What we see happening a lot of the times is the police will say, okay, since a child was present in the home, that technically is a form of negligent child abuse under the law. So if your child is listed as a protected party, technically the criminal courts have no jurisdiction over custody unless the kid is listed on the protection order. So a lot of what we have to do is we have to find ways to make sure that parents can have contact with their children in a way that works well. But the other thing that we can do is we have a lot of partners that we talk to who practice criminal law. Well, we practice criminal law and they practice family law, and we work together as a unit. I think it's really important to have a lawyer that specializes in one particular type of law. So we only do criminal law, but we have friends and colleagues who do family law. And we'll tell our clients, hey, this person is a really good choice for your case. Go talk to them. They can pick whoever they want though, and we work with them. And we make sure that when there's a divorce case pending or a child custody case pending, we're doing everything on our side from the criminal case to support them and not doing anything that's going to hurt the child custody case, but that we'll make sure that they have contact as soon as they can. So it can be very convoluted, but there are a couple of things that we can do, at least at the very beginning, to get them back in touch with their children.
Awesome. That's good. Yeah, I know a lot of times like the kids come into it. It's some good information. Just anyways, if it's you or someone you know, now you at least know kind of like there are ways to be okay with what's happening, to still see your kids or to modify the orders or something like that.
And I mean, what our thing with Right Law Group too is we very much, I know it sounds cheesy, but we very much try to do things the right way. So we are never going to be that law firm that tries to get kids involved unnecessarily. Children do not need that trauma. They do not need to go through that. So if there's any way that we can make it seem as normal as possible for the kids' experience with their parents, that's what we're going to fight for. Whatever is best for the children and the family as a whole, that's what we're going to do. Obviously, our clients' best interests come very first and foremost, so we're not going to tell them to do anything that will get them in trouble, but we will fight for them to be in contact with their kids from the very beginning.
So the next topic, and then we're going to wrap it up here, but just kind of like the light at the end of the tunnel kind of thing, because a lot of this is heavy, it's serious, it's a big thing, but how do you get to go home? When does that happen? Like, during this case, is it the orders dropped or, modified, you could just go home, or how does it work? Because that's, back to normal, back to your schedule, back to your life after, like we said, sometimes you just have a hard day. When do you get to go back to your life?
This is the typical lawyer response, but the answer is it depends. So a couple of ways that this happens. So when that criminal charge is levied against you, you have a domestic violence charge, you're told you can't go home, you're told you can't be with your spouse, the very earliest you could ever get back to your family is if we're able to get that protection order modified to allow you to have contact. Now, a lot of people think that you can just drop the protection order. That is not a thing.
No.
In a criminal case, your protection order stays with you the whole time the case is going. That includes if you have to take a plea and you're on probation, the protection order is still there. So what we try to do is we try to modify the protection order because it can't be dropped legally until the end of the case, but modify it to allow contact. And there are different kinds of contact. We were talking earlier about texting and Talking Parents app. That's called indirect contact. But to allow for full contact means you can talk to your spouse, you can be home, you can physically be present with them. If we can get that modification of the protection order, you can go home as soon as the judge grants that.
Okay.
Now, in more difficult cases and more contentious cases, it can be a lot longer. I have a lot of clients who unfortunately have to live with friends or relatives. Some people even have to live in hotel rooms because they can't go home. The only time that the protection order is going to be completely gone is at the end of the case. And then we also see people filing civil protection orders, and that lasts forever. So there are a couple of different legal nuances you have to understand about protection orders. But generally speaking, when we're talking about the light at the end of the tunnel, there are some positive things that we can do in these cases. Number one, sometimes, a domestic violence case, it's never a good thing, but sometimes it serves as a point for everyone to say, oh, whoa, there is something very, very wrong with our relationship. We need to either break up so that this isn't an ongoing thing, this is not healthy for either of us, or it's a signal that there's something else going on. Usually it's alcohol or drug related, and they say, okay, I'm going to do what I need to do to get into treatment to protect my family. So that can be a silver lining. The other thing is, a lot of times, like we talked about before, a lot of times people call the police because they're scared or they want the other person out of the house, but they're not trying to get them arrested. And in those cases, the person who's charged still has to go through the criminal justice system. But we can often exercise different avenues where if you get an agreement with the district attorney, you can go through treatment, you can go through classes, and then eventually get it dismissed. And once it's dismissed, Right Law Group is going to jump in there and say, okay, seal this immediately so no one can ever see this was a charge. But there are different ways. Just because you have a charge doesn't mean it's the end of the world, doesn't mean you're going to be labeled a violent criminal. We have different things that we can use, and there are lights at the end of the tunnel, especially on first-time offenses or things like people throwing water on each other or slapping each other, things that are stupid to do. You should not do that to someone you love, but things that are not truly violent crimes, we can get you out of it in a lot of different ways. if you're willing to put in the work. It's not just automatically is dismissed.
The work is really important.
You got to be willing to put in that time.
You got to be committed.
Hey Maylin.
Hey Maylin, how's it going? So yeah, that's like just, there's a lot that we can do to help you, but you also have to do the work. You can't just be like, I hired you, I have nothing to do. You take, like, you got to be
I mean, sometimes you can. Like with traffic tickets, we don't even make our clients
DV,
go to court.
you got to be committed. You got to be here for it.
Yeah. Well, and that's true of any law firm that you hire. I mean, we're talking about what we know, which is our law firm. But if you have a lawyer working with you on a domestic violence case, you have to realize that they don't know you. They don't know your life. They don't know your story. They only know what they read in the police reports. So you have to make sure you build that connection with your lawyer or your law firm. Yeah. And that's what I think is so great about our firm. We've got, 8-10 people here fully supporting every single client, making sure that they feel heard.
Accessible.
Yes.
To be there, to get to know you.
And we have a lot of clients that we stay friends with after, and we go hang out and see them, make sure that they're doing okay. And it can be a positive experience. It's never going to be a fun experience or a good experience, but it can be a positive experience so long as you understand that it does take work, it does take time, and it takes trust. It takes the client trusting us to do our job, and it takes us trusting our clients to put that effort in to do the right thing to get back on track.
Definitely. So that's gonna, so this was our second domestic violence live video here, and we're gonna do another one next week. Like we've been talking about a lot in the other video and this one, a lot about protection orders. This protection order, that protection order, what can you do, what does it mean? So that's going to be the focus of our next video. We're going to go over different kinds of protection orders and restraining orders and that kind of thing.
And it's not just criminal law. So protection orders, this is the one area I always say that it's very important that you get a law firm that specializes. Since protection orders kind of span across criminal and civil, we do all of those, but there are all kinds of different ways those can go. So it should be pretty good and get some good information.
It's gonna be a good one.
Yeah.
So if you have any, interest in that, or you just want to know, definitely tune in. We'll be going live around the same time next week.
Lunchtime,
So I hope everyone has a good weekend. Everyone stay safe. Call us if you need us.
And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in this thread, put them on our Facebook, text them to us.
Always, definitely.
Anything that you guys want answered. If there's a specific topic, let us know and we'll get it on the plan and answer all your questions.
Definitely, guys. Thanks for tuning in and make good choices,
Thanks, guys.